Good morning again. I do want to make you aware, in 2 weeks we will have our first 2 missions contributions. We'll do those on the 6th and the 20th, just like we did them last year. Take up a separate contribution on those days, and so I guess this make everybody aware and those waiting on the table aware. But anyhow, it's a great opportunity, I believe, to be a part of the work that's being done and the different efforts that we have been blessed with in helping out. And I thank you in advance for those who will seek to contribute towards those. If you want to, if you have any questions about who it is that we're supporting, we still have a list up from last year on the wall there on what's our missions board area, and it's got even a breakdown of how we contributed towards those. And I'm getting the signal to grab the microphone. So I won't do that again, but how about now? Wow. I've never been able to hear myself speak, so usually Troy politely turns me all the way down, and he tells me that for different reasons. Let's go to God in prayer. Father God, we thank you. What a blessing it is, God, to be here. God, to worship you. God, to be filled with your presence. God, to experience life in you. To gain the strength, God, that we need to go from this moment and on to other moments in life, God, that you place us in. Doors of opportunity, God, to make a difference for your kingdom. So, God, we're thankful for the 2 Sundays that we will spend specifically next month, God, contributing towards mission efforts. God, those laboring in fields for your sake. God, we are thankful for those who answer that call. God, we're thankful for those doing local work. God, missionaries do not simply travel across seas only, God, or to other countries, but God, there are so many that do a work here at home, God, that when we reflect on those, we're grateful. And God, we ask that we would all answer that call to live purposely for you. God, as we study your word today, we're thankful. We're thankful of the impact that your word has in our hearts, has in our soul, has in our mind. God, everything that we are. That's what we desire to give to you. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. Truth. We think about this word and what this word means, especially in light of that we just heard from John chapter 4. It says the true worshipers, those who worship in spirit and in truth. And mentioned this Wednesday night that obviously if you think of one thing to be true, the other side of that is false. And is maybe giving a picture, an image of a different way to go about doing something. You speak to your kids and you ask them to tell you the truth. All right? Look at them, they're all looking a little way. Not talking to me. But, all of us, and even in those moments, and not just our kids, when we go to someone to ask them a question, we expect them to give us what? The truth. We expect them to be honest with us. We expect them to be, like I say, truthful in those moments. When Jason and I were going through preaching school, we would have our preaching labs, where when it was all over, we had the different times as we went on through our time in school, where at one point you'd have kind of a 5 to 7 minute lesson, or then you'd have a 10 to 15 minute lesson. But after each of those, we're getting excited, 10 to 15 minutes? All right. Well, we're past those. We've graduated on the longer ones. when we would finish each of those, as classmates, we would critique each other's sermons and talk about those and maybe just give our opinions, our suggestions, all those things. And we asked each other to be honest. Because honesty is what would help us in that moment to maybe to work on things, to improve on things. Well, in this sense of this question that is, or this statement that is given from a question, I find it very interesting in how Jesus responds. Because you've got this Samaritan woman, and we know her story. And, if we maybe not know it well enough, I encourage you to go to John chapter 4 and read her story. But that's not what this response is about. She's asking the question, okay, where is worship going to take place? This place, that place. This mountain, that mountain. And what Jesus reminds, what Jesus maybe informs his audience, those reading it, whatever it may be, is where worship begins. Worship begins in the heart. Worship begins in the mind. And it involves us coming honest before God. And it involves us surrendering things and offering up to God our true and honest worship. Now listen, I know we can get into all sorts of discussions of ways to go about doing it, but no matter the case, Jesus informs us where it begins and what it is about, what it involves. The phrase "truth is in the eye of the beholder." We've heard this before, and yes, there is a semblance of obviously truth to it, but I think what we misunderstand is who is the beholder in this moment. Because so many times, truth in the eye of the beholder is based off our opinion on how we think it ought to play out. And so I'm a beholder, and you are too, and we all are in that moment. So what is true to me is true to me, and it may not be true to you. Jesus tells us what true worship is. It is not something that takes place in certain blocks of time throughout our week. In other words, we're not simply worshiping God only when we gather together collectively as a body of believers. That worship is not something that we go to. Worship is who we are. Worship is what we do. Worship is what defines us when we worship the one who created us. When we worship the one who gave us our purpose, who gives us the very definition of who we are. The one who defines us. And so when we think about this, and when we connect this, especially to John chapter 15, I invite you to turn to John chapter 15, because when we think about this, in this chapter, what we have here is the last of the I ams. The I am statements that God gives through Jesus when he's talking about, I am the resurrection of life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the bread of life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the light of the world. Well, in John chapter 15, you have the last of the I am statements. The last of those statements. But what is interesting is, and we'll hit on this a little bit later, is with this I am statement, Jesus now for the first time adds God into this equation. Right? He says this, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. In this, what you find when you look at the Greek, how this plays out, the words I am and is are the same exact words. He says, I am the true vine. And speaking for the Father, he says, I am the vine dresser. And so he adds a new element to this understanding of these I am statements. He adds a new element to this, that to understand, again, that when you couple this with John chapter 4, when he's talking about true and proper worship, of how we come into God's presence, of how we see God, of where we view ourselves in those moments, we begin to see of our connection to God in those moments. And we begin to see what truth is. Not in the way that our opinion leads us to understand, not in the way that our opinion leads us to comprehend or to develop its own definition, but we begin to see that truth is found in God, that truth is found in Jesus, and that our connection to Him, matters. In the way that also, on top of that, we respond in that connection to Him matters. So we do not come before God with superficial worship. We do not come before Him simply showing up, simply being present, simply saying, I was there, all is well. Because remember, worship is not something that takes place in certain blocks of time in our week. Worship is who we are. And so he goes on in John chapter 15. He said, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. And every branch that does not bear fruit, He prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, or remain in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides again or remains in the vine, neither can you. Separate from God. What he says is we lose the ability to grow and mature in the way God created us to grow and mature. Separate from God, we lose the ability to reach that potential that He created us, that He designed us for in the very beginning. He says, I created you for a purpose. I created you to fulfill a purpose. And to live that out and to reach that potential, in order to do those things, in order to live out true worship, true and proper worship, in order to worship in righteous ways, he says, remain or abide in me. He says, other than that, what is happening in our lives? We're not reaching the full potential that God desires in us. We're coming before Him with that superficial worship. You know, you can tell, we can all tell, when someone comes before us and they're not genuine. They're not genuine in the way that they speak to us, in the way that they talk to us. They're just being polite. And that's not to make a slight over those that do that, but it's just we can tell. Sometimes when we're not sure what to say, right? We get past the don't say nothing at all. We just try to say what seems very polite. But you know, we can tell when you ask somebody a question and just the way they respond. In the way that it's just, you can tell there's something disingenuous about it. When we come before God, do we not imagine, do we not realize, or do we not comprehend that God is aware that when we just come before Him because we have to? When we come with this mindset that we'd rather not be here, or we'd rather not do this, we'd rather not sing, we'd rather not respond in this way, we'd rather not do fill in the blanks. If we can recognize that in one another, now imagine offering that up to God. He calls us to genuine worship. Not to, at this time we do this, and at this time we do that. And He tells us when you come in live in communion, when you participate in the Lord's Supper, the mindset that you're to have in your heart, the way that you are to come before Him, grateful, thankful, celebrating what has been done for us, living out the joy that we have, the sacrifice that was made on our behalf, living lives in response into what God did for us when He sent His Son to die for us. And not only that, but to celebrate the Lord's Supper with an understanding that Jesus is no longer in the grave, but to be grateful at the forgiveness of sins, at the restoration that we experience in a relationship with Him, that just as He rose from the dead, that He forgave our sins, and that when we reenact in baptism that death, that burial, and that resurrection, and that we rise anew in that moment, that He takes away the old, He takes away that past, that He creates something new in that moment, and that when we celebrate that, not just around the table, but when we sing about that God, and we come and we break open God's Word and discover and be reminded of that God, we come before Him not with somber hearts, but with joy because of what has been done for us. We live genuine lives of worship before Him. Now listen, I understand that some things are difficult to comprehend in those moments. Why things had to happen the way that they did. Why Jesus had to face the death that He did. When we get past trying to discover those things, can we not rejoice in the moment that it happened? Not that someone suffered, but what they suffered for. They suffered for you, they suffered for me. That this person, this Savior, this Jesus, this Messiah, suffered so that we wouldn't live out eternal suffering. So that we could have hope. So when we think about this word truth and what it means to us and what it should mean in our worship before Him. Again, as we find in John chapter 15, it's connected to these I am statements, but also the vine is a symbol throughout the Old Testament of covenant, of living in covenant relationship with Him. In Psalm chapter 80, verses 9 through 16, it says, "You cleared the ground for it. It took deep root and filled the land. The mountains were covered with its shade, the mighty cedars with its branches. It sent out its branches to the sea and its shoots to the rivers. Why then have you broken down its walls so that all who pass along the way pluck its fruit? The boar from the forest ravages it, and all that move in the field feed on it. Turn again, O God of hosts. Look down from heaven and see. Have regard for this vine, the stock your right hand planted. And for the son you made strong for yourself. They have burned it with fire. They have cut it down. May they perish at the rebuke of your face." Think of the connection that what comes up in these verses, that beginning, that understanding, the vine, the cedars, the roots that God established. And then the reaction when those begin to break down. When those connections begin to wither away. When those connections begin to fall away. We're reminded that the vine represents, again, covenant for God's people. In Isaiah chapter 5, beginning at verse 1, says, "Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on every fertile hill. He dug it out, or he dug it and cleared it of stones, and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it, and hewed out a wine vat in it. And he looked for it to yield grapes. but he yielded wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have done in it? When I looked for it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its walls, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste, and it shall not be pruned or hoed, or briars and thorns shall grow up. I will also command the clouds that they may not rain upon it. We see again this connection of what God planted, of what God put into place. And when man begins to define his own standard or measure, truth starts to begin to look at truth in their own eyes and not in the eyes of God. Then we look at Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 21 says, Yet I planted you a choice vine, wholly of pure seed. How then have you turned degenerate and become a wild vine? And then in Hosea chapter 10, Israel is a luxuriant vine that yields its fruit. The more his fruit increased, the more altars he built. As his country improved, he improved his pillars. Their heart is false, and now they must bear their guilt. The Lord will break down their altars and destroy their pillars. Remember, we can recognize that when we come before each other in disingenuous ways, and in the Old Testament what we recognize is that when his people who were called by his name came in ways that were not righteous, were not true, how God responded, how God reacted in those moments. Notice it was not God who changed things. God responded in ways of discipline to remind us what it means to live in covenant. Remind us of how we come before Him. You are in me, He says, and I am in you. This relationship that the Father and the Son has, and this relationship that the Trinity has with us, that the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit that guides us each and every day, and in each and every moment, to respond to Him in such a way that is genuine. Respond to Him in such a way that is humble. Respond to Him in such a way that celebrates what has been done for us, maybe even inspire us. And in many ways, that's the message of the prodigal son. That God welcomes us in spite of our past, in spite of the past choices that we make before Him. But here's the good news about that. Here's the news that we can rejoice in because of what God has done for us. We have the opportunity. We have the opportunity to give back to Him something. We have the opportunity to give back to Him something that lives out those words that we speak. We have the opportunity to come before Him with hearts understanding of the mistakes that we have made in our life, of understanding that we're not perfect, but comprehending the fact that He is making us in the way that we should be, that He has created us for a purpose, and when we fell short of reaching that potential, God sent His Son to die for us so that we could live eternity with Him, and so that we could respond to Him, and not just in
me, when you do not remain in me, when you do not abide in me, when you try to do this on your own, we do not reach, we do not fulfill, we do not accomplish what God sent us to do. To worship Him with everything that we have and everything that we are. Now listen, I understand that we all comprehend this at different levels. Maybe based off the experiences that we've had in this life, maybe based off our age. I don't know. I know I don't understand things the way I did 20 years ago. And I'm thankful for that. I'm grateful that my spiritual life has matured. I'm grateful that maybe I can see things in a new way and maybe in a more profound way. I'm grateful that because of the moments that I've gone through in this life, because of the seasons that I've experienced in this life, that even in the midst of it all, I've grown in my faith. And I know you are too, and I know you live that out every day. Because of different things that happen along the way. Struggles that we experience. And when we come before Him with hearts desiring to worship Him every day, in every way, we're reminded, not just on Sunday, not just on Wednesday, of what God desires to do for us. We go out every day, seeking, searching for ways to grow in our relationship with Him. Seeking for ways to grow in our understanding of Him. Seeking for ways to grow in our knowledge and our wisdom. Seeking to grow. You know how it happens? When we remain in Him. Is worship going to be on this mountain? Worship going to be on that mountain? So if we look at it that way, we look at truth in the eyes of the beholder as the one who just seeks to determine those things. God says, I want you to look at it with my eyes. Worship begins in your heart. Worship is a pursuit. It's a pursuit of Him. Of Him who created us. It is a never-ending pursuit. Well, maybe till the moment we're in His presence. Let's pray. Father God, we thank You. God, we thank You for the opportunity to live in fellowship with You. God, we thank You for the opportunity to be provided for, to be blessed with, all that comes, God, in a relationship with You. And our response to this, Father, our response to this, God, is and should be one of thankfulness, of appreciation, of recognition, God, of what You did for us. And because of that, God, He said, You tell us, You call us to live out our spiritual sacrifice, our daily spiritual sacrifice. You call us to take up our cross and follow after You. God, You call us to live in such a way, not in the way that the world is, but God, in spiritual ways. With hearts centered. God, we thank You for finding us worthy. It's in Your Son's name that we pray. Today, and every day, we have a chance to put the past behind us. And again, we serve a God who forgives our past, forgives our past mistakes. And when we come to Him, He says, welcome. Welcome. Today, if you need to return to the arms of the Savior, today, if you need to live in relationship, in covenant relationship with Him, live as a baptized believer, to live as those who are from past sins and forgiven from past sins. Understand you are free. Know that because he said,